Hello everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, Guided Machine Learning, Intelligent Auto-Classification of Content Using Managed Vocabularies. Let me start by introducing you to our speakers. Today we have Jesse Lambert and Nuno Lopez. Both are Senior Semantic Solutions Architects at Top Quadrant. Jesse will begin today's presentation with a discussion around unstructured content in the enterprise, basic tagging, and semantic search, and Nuno will demo these capabilities using Tagger and AutoClassifier as part of TopBraid EDG. We will then wrap up with a brief Q&A. Before we get started, let's review a few logistical items. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along by using your GoToWebinar controls. To post questions, please look on the right-hand side control panel. You should see a drop-down box for questions. If you click on the box, you should be able to post your question at any time during the presentation. We will address as many questions as time allows at the conclusion of the webinar. We will also be recording the webinar and will send a link to the recorded version as well. With that, I will hand it over to Jesse to get us started. Jesse?
Thanks, Christy. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are Top Quadrant, founded in 2001, which so happens to be the same year that the vision of the semantic web was born. We've been engaged with semantic web standards ever since, and we offer enterprise knowledge graph technologies for full scope data governance capabilities. We'll talk more about our flagship TopBraid EDG solution in a bit, but before we go there, I just want to introduce the reason or purpose for this webinar, and that would be unstructured content in the enterprise. So in the enterprise, unstructured content comes with certain issues. One thing is that keyword search, conversational search, it just doesn't work as well there as it does in the open web. And that's usually due to the more technical language and the domain-specific dimension of an enterprise. In addition to that, we've got all kinds of different objects, slides, emails, documents, all kinds of unstructured content there. And not only are they in all different shapes and sizes, but they're all over the place. And the last bullet here, bolded, of course, the world seems to have accepted the fact that an enterprise tends to have 80% of its information in unstructured sources. So this can be visualized a bit like this. On the right-hand side, you have all those different unstructured pieces of content all over the place. And the other 20%, the structured side of the world, we're trying to show on the left-hand side here. And if we just focus on it for a second, you can, it seems to be pretty well understood that it's very expensive and time-consuming to create this kind of content or map this kind of content for the stuff on the right-hand side. So if we take a deeper look at the content on the left-hand side, you'll find things like glossaries here, reference data or code sets, and taxonomies. And we can leverage that. We can take advantage of that kind of content to start enriching and bringing meaning to the content on the right-hand side. So that's the trick to start bridging the gap. Once we start doing that, we can also link that unstructured content to the structured content side. And in theory, we've started to bridge the gap that exists between the two. Well, let's take it a step further down an automated path for efficiency's sake and for optimization, and really start bringing a lot of meaning to this content. So what we want to do is we want to auto-classify this and connect all of this different metadata together. So once that's done, if it's done right, you'll have added value to your content for humans and machines to be able to take advantage of in the sense of search, intelligent search, and discovery purposes. You'll also have wanted to use machine learning. No need to make manual rules, because every domain comes with different rules, and rules lead to the need for more rules, and it becomes very expensive. So you want to take advantage of machine learning. You'll have also wanted to use or keep the human in the loop for review. You want them to basically be able to have a full governed process, not just for the automated tags or connections that are being built, but for the controlled vocabularies themselves, like the taxonomies and that structured content that we're using to bridge the gap. So governed process for that and the metadata about your corpus of content, your unstructured content. And last but not least, it would be great if all of this, once this interconnected web was available, that it was something that you could integrate to other systems via API. Well, these capabilities are what you get with our TopBraid Edge solution. TopBraid Edge is our enterprise knowledge graph solution for capturing full scope data governance, and it's offered in different modules. Today, we'll be focused on demonstrating our vocabulary management package, as well as our TopBraid Tagger and AutoClassifier module. With those selected, what you get is taxonomies and ontologies for representing your domain representation. So that's where you can represent in a structured way and a machine understandable way the meaningful aspects of your domain in your enterprise. Crosswalks is also made available to you to speed up the process of building that representation. Then we enter into what was added because of the tagger and AutoClassifier, the add-on. And Corpora, that's for hosting your unstructured contents metadata, which is really the first step towards a solution in this scenario. And content tag sets, those are for connecting between your Corpora and your domain representation, more specifically to the terms and concepts inside of the taxonomies. Now, the red dotted line here, let's just say that that's representing TopBraid AutoClassifier, which is a guided machine learning process that's running in the background to automate the creation of these content tag sets. AutoClassifier uses state-of-the-art machine learning to automatically assign the most relevant tags in your content, and therefore adds enrichment. And it takes advantage of machine learning being controlled by vocabularies and a human in the loop to rapidly refine training sets and initial tag suggestions. So let's talk a little bit about tagging in general. This is really a simpler way of saying what AutoClassifier does. Machine learning, guided machine learning, controlled vocabularies, it's all there to be taken advantage of, but it comes down to really saying something like your content, and more specifically, this book here is about Paris, stock options, and GDPR, for example. So it's about bridging the gap between your corpora and your domain representation and your concept vocabularies. Now, the machine learning side of this, there is a training piece that's involved, but the wonderful thing about our approach is that you can get started with a minimal set of training data, because what you want to do is leverage your expert knowledge here, and you can really get started with TopBraid AutoClassifier with a few dozen documents being trained against your concept vocabulary. And then your training set can evolve in an automated fashion because the human in the loop review capabilities that are provided by TopBraid Edge. The curation and workflow process is built into the TopBraid Edge platform by default. With those kinds of tags and connections in place throughout your metadata, your corpora connected to your domain representation, you can expose semantic or intelligent search to human users and APIs. What you see on the screen is a screenshot. It might be a little difficult to see, but Nuno's going to actually be demonstrating this end-to-end today. I'm just starting to introduce the content here. So this is Search the Edge, which has been populated with a corpora of research papers that we've gathered from around the world, from places like the Federal Reserve, Central Bank of Europe, Bank of England, Bank of France, and other places. So we have a nice corpora. We've got a little bit of metadata about thousands of documents from around the world. We know where they came from, but we don't necessarily understand the content. I myself am no expert in the financial domain or the economics domain. So I'm starting the question, well, how would you have done this? How did you build these facets on the left-hand side here? Facets that allow you to do intelligent discovery and search capabilities across this rich set of documents. Well, what we did, because we're no experts in that domain, was we did some research and we found structured content like glossaries and thesauri that were publicly available, and we bootstrapped a taxonomy of over 7,000 terms, and this is something that can be done in the matter of a few days. So all of a sudden, TopBraid Edge, while it's not domain specific, it has a wonderful representation of economic research papers, and it has a pretty good representation of an economics domain because of this taxonomy. And now we're ready to actually take a look at how does a search application like our Search the Edge get built and allow a human user and APIs to access that kind of content. And with that, I've set the stage to give it over to Nuno, who's going to do our demonstration today. Over to you, Nuno.
Yeah, hi everyone, thanks Jesse. So, can you see my screen? Okay, it should be coming up now. What I'm showing here is for those of you who might be familiar with Edge, this is just the landing page. And you'll see, I just want to point out some of the asset collections that Jesse was talking about. So Jesse briefly mentioned taxonomies and ontologies, corpora, and content tag sets. So we have these here under asset collections on the left-hand side. We also have crosswalks that Jesse described, but we won't be using those today. The other feature that you can use from the search, from the landing page or the main page is Search the Edge that Jesse was talking about. And this is basically our free text search engine over all the contents in Edge basically. And data that I have loaded now basically are these documents from the Federal Reserve Board that Jesse mentioned. So we can, for instance, start searching for banks, and you'll be shown with a list of documents that that contain the word banks in their either title or description or body. You have some faceted search, some search on the left-hand side, so you can filter on where the documents reside. We'll have a look at these. I already have them loaded. You can search on topic, on the type of doc that we have only documents, and the topics that we have assigned. And these are basically some of the tags that we already have assigned from the MAECO taxonomy. So I just want to give a brief overview on the actual search results. These are basically documents, and you're presented with the title along with a short description of the document. And in this specific case where I did download the copy of the version, I cached the copy locally. You can actually view the source of the document, so you can read the complete document from here by pressing on the View Cached Copy button. So how did we go about creating this, and how did we make Edge aware of all of these documents and tags? We used a corpora that Jesse was talking about, and the taxonomies. So let's have a quick look at the taxonomies. So the MAECO taxonomy, like Jesse described, this was just a quick creation of a taxonomy based on other available sources. And we have a fairly structured representation here. So we have concepts from the Journal of Economic Literature, for instance, which includes concepts from different domains like macroeconomics, monetary economics, and something along the lines of consumption, saving, production. Each of these concepts is actually includes several pieces of data that Autoclassifier is going to use. So for instance, the preferred label, we have the labels for the concepts are actually in different languages, and Autoclassifier can leverage these. Also, we have alternative labels or other synonyms for this term also in different languages. For instance, we have also in the MAECO taxonomy descriptions for organizations, and in here we have something along the lines of banks, which further divides into central bank. We have an entity for Bank of England and so on. What I wanted to highlight is that even though what Jesse described, it doesn't take too much work to create something like this, and this is exactly the kind of structured representation of the domain that we're looking for to use with Autoclassifier. The next up is the corpora, and in this case, what the corpora does is just make your document set aware, make Edge aware of your documents wherever you store them. So by having a look at the list of corpus that I have locally, I have two corpus. One is for the training set that we use for Autoclassifier, and the other one is the full set of papers where we want to run Autoclassifier on. And from the title, you'll see that the names are actually appended with S3. I just want to give a quick overview of how we actually connect Edge to your document set. So we do that by creating a new corpus. And if you're familiar with Edge, you'll see that most of these options are actually common about creating any asset collection in Edge. So you'll need to specify a label or a name for the asset collection. You can provide the description, and you can select to include the asset collection in Search the Edge in the index. So later on, we'll actually be creating a content tag set, and then we'll be using this using the content tag set in Search the Edge. What is specific to the corpus is this section on where we can specify what the data source is. And the idea is that you can have documents in different data sources, and Edge will connect to those data sources. So I just want to highlight the CMIS connector and the S3 connector. The CMIS is basically if you have documents in a content management system that supports the CMIS protocol, Edge can connect directly to it and read the metadata, possibly the documents themselves. In case of S3, and that's the one that I used for setting up the corpus that you saw in the previous screen, we had documents in Amazon Cloud under S3 buckets. We had one bucket for the training set and another one for the full set of documents. If I now access, for instance, the training set, you'll basically I already fetched all the data from S3, and I have the data locally, and we have about 80 documents in the training set. So when you go to this editor, you can select any document that you want to browse. For instance, if I search for banks, I can pick this one, and when I select the document, you're shown an overview of some metadata about the document, like the authors, the date, the creation date, the title, most relevant, and along with a content or the parsed content of the document as Edge uses it. So it's not exactly the source PDF, but it gives you an idea of what the contents of the documents are. This is actually what Autoclassifier is going to work on. What we now use to connect the corpus or the training set or the full set of documents to the MAECO taxonomy are content tag sets. And in this case, I also have created one content tag set for the training set. So if I jump into the editor, I'll collapse this to give a bit more of space. But I just want to give some ideas of how you can go about creating your training sets. You can do this. You can do that from within Edge completely, or you can pull in data from other sources. But for instance, if you were starting from Edge, on the left-hand side, you can search for documents. So these are the documents that are in the corpus. So if I search for banks here, I will be presented with the same results that we had in the corpus that we saw in the corpus editor. The middle panel, when I select a document, is also populated with the same view that you see in the corpus. So you see the same information on the authors, on what the title is, and this parsed content of the document. Under current tags are basically what allows you to add and remove tags from this document associated with this document. For instance, I already have some tags created here that I used as a training set, but I can, for instance, remove some tags, and later on I can add them as well. So in order to add them, we'll be using this add tag button, but we need to first find the tag or the concept that we want to assign. So on the right-hand side, you can navigate the MAECO taxonomy. So this is a representation that you saw already in the taxonomy editor. So if I want to, for instance, assign the bank tag, we know that under organization, there is a bank organization. So I can go directly there and select that. And you'll see that in the bottom panel, this was populated with the information about this bank, about the bank concept, that is. Once we have a specific concept selected, we can press the add selected tag, selected concept, and this is actually added to the list of tags. This is in the case where you know the location of your tag. If you don't know, or if you want to search for all the concepts in the taxonomy, you can actually switch to the concept search. So here I can basically do any kind of search over the concepts. Again, I'll be using banks as our example. And this just returns me a list of all the concepts that have banks in the taxonomy. This is still a fairly large list, so it's 130 entries. What I can do is I can further refine this subset, these results. And for instance, if I try to search for crisis, you'll see that there was a global financial crisis result added, and this is because it's matching banks in all the text in the concept. So actually, crisis is coming from the title, and banks is coming from the text definition that we have associated with the concept. And similarly, I can just go and add this as a tag to the concept, to the document. So Jesse, I think, briefly mentioned this, but you could start creating your training set this way. You don't have to start with a large set of documents, a handful of documents, add a handful of tags. And the idea is then that you can start training your model and iteratively refining the model. The idea of the human in the loop is then necessary at this stage to try to validate the model and the results that it returns. But once you accept we'll have a look at that. Once you accept the suggestions from the model, these will actually be the same as any manually entered tags. And also, there are other ways you can pull in tags. For instance, if you're connecting to a content management system, most likely that content management system will already have some tags associated with the document. There are ways that you can pull that into Edge and start using that as a training set. So now I want to start showing you what we use, how we use Autoclassifier. So the idea is that we now create a new content tag set. I'll name it FRB webinar. And in this case, we're connecting our corpus with the full set of papers that you saw with the MAECO taxonomy. And like I mentioned previously, we do want to include this in Search the Edge so that we can enhance search. When we create content tag sets, there's actually a second screen, a configuration screen, where the main thing we need to specify is what is the default tag property. So in this case, Edge ships with one type of tags that are used, type of connections to concepts, which is a generic topic. But like Jesse mentioned in the presentation, and he had some slides on this, we could have several of these, one for the financial domain, one for the geographical domain, and use those in tagging. You can and these are very easy to define, and you can define your own from within Edge. Once we create this content tag set, we're actually shown with an editor just the same as you saw for creating the training set. I can do a search and get the results. And in this case, if I actually do a search without typing anything, we'll see that the full set of documents are 713 documents in this corpus. So this is the full set of documents. And I won't be adding any tags here. I just wanted to show you how many documents, and now we will basically use Autoclassifier on top of these documents. To use Autoclassifier, we basically need one small configuration step, where if we go into Manage and then Configure Autoclassifier, we can pick what are the properties that have content that we want to Autoclassifier to look at. So in this case, we have the actual content, which was the parsed version of the document. We have probably file name, title. That's usually a set of properties that will contain some data and will be relevant for auto-classification. You can change the probability threshold. So the idea is that if you decrease this number, you will get more tag suggestions. So if you think that your model is not providing enough tag suggestions, you can reduce this number. What's going to happen is that the tags will probably not be as relevant as having a higher number here. Usually 5% is a good starting point. Also, the content language we can either leave as default, or we can pick English in this case. Once we save these changes, you'll see that the bottom part of the configuration is actually allows you to do training. I won't show this here. This is basically the process I did in the other content tag set where I built the training model. And you actually get the button is disabled because we have a warning saying that we don't actually have any tags that we can use in this content tag set. But if there were, we could actually start training. For this specific content tag set, what we want to do is reuse the training model that we created in the other content tag set. So for that, I just select the FRB training set content tag set from the select box. And we have the training model ready to be used. So I can jump directly into using Autoclassifier. And here, I'll just start running Autoclassifier. I'll give some hints as to what some different options when running Autoclassifier later, but what it's doing now is just running all the documents, passing them through the previously built model, and retrieving the tag suggestions. The way it works is that the tag suggestions are actually stored in a workflow. For instance, we already see a workflow created here with these tag suggestions. And these workflows are basically what we call a sandboxed copy of our main data, the production copy as we call it. And the idea, this is what allows you to have this human in the loop validation step that's essential when you start building your model. So actually in the taggings, if we go to the editor, although the tags have already started to being generated and Autoclassifier has already started to generate tags, if I search for documents which have any value for topic, I don't get any results. And that's just because they're actually stored in this workflow. If I now go back to the Autoclassifier tab, the autoclassification is finished. So it took 38 seconds, as you can see, for the 713 documents. And the validation step that we use next is we do that by clicking on this results link. But before I do that, I just want to highlight, I ran Autoclassifier before and I left this checkbox marked because I want to have this validation step. If I don't check the box and I run Autoclassifier, all the suggestions will actually be committed directly into production. So it's going to bypass all this creation of workflow and the need for the human in the loop intervention here. If you have a model that is already well trained and you're quite confident in the results that it provides, you can use this feature and use Autoclassifier and not require to have the validation step. Also, if you're using Autoclassifier with other systems, you don't need to use the workflow. But for now, for demo purposes, I will just go have a look at the results that were generated. And what this does, what this screen shows you, is a list of documents for which Autoclassifier found tags. So if we have a look at the first one, for instance, you can see that it proposed, you can see the list of proposed tags. If there were any tags already available in production, they would be shown on this part of on the left-hand side. In this case, we just created the content tag set and it didn't have any tags, so all this column will always be empty. The idea with the proposed tags and having this human validation is that users can have a look at the tags that were proposed and, for instance, remove some tags that they don't find are adequate for the document. So to do that, I can press the reject button and that tag is actually no longer associated with this document. And keep in mind that this is still working on the working copy, so nothing is yet committed to production. If I want to have a look at what the document actually contains, I can click on the link itself, and this sends me to the editor where I can have the review of in the preview of the content and the suggested tags as well. I can also delete tags from here directly. The idea with the human validation is that then to get a sense of how well the model is performing so far, you can validate or you can have a look at as many documents as you want, basically. Usually getting an idea of using a subset of documents will already give you an idea of how well the model is behaving. And like I mentioned earlier, maybe remove the ones which you don't think are adequate in that are applicable to that document. At the end, once you're happy enough that you've validated some documents, you can use the buttons at the bottom of the screen, so you can either approve all the tags or reject all the tags. In this case, I'm going to approve all the tags. And what this does is actually take all the tag suggestions that are still in the working copy. So the ones that were manually discarded will not be considered, and is committing them into the production copy. So, and the idea is that you only need to do this while you are building your model, while you're iterating over your model. If you don't use the checkbox when you run Autoclassifier, you won't be using this step. If we now just have a quick look at the editor, we can see that the documents have the tags, which this was basically the same tags that you saw when I clicked the link from the report to show you the overview of the document with the tags associated, but these are now in production. So at this point, there is no distinction between the tags that were manually entered by a user or were imported by some process and the ones that were suggested by Autoclassifier. So the point here is that then I can take these tags and I can further retrain my model using these extended tags as a training set and keep iterating over the model this way. One of the main advantages of this is actually to improve a search engine, whether it's our own internal search the edge engine or an external search engine you might have. And you can, for instance, build some facets based on these generated tags. So I will actually quickly execute some rules which build these facets for the search engine. This step could actually be integrated with the workflow and be completely transparent, but for demo purposes, we thought to keep it this way. And also this illustrates that you can do further processing based on the tags that were generated from Autoclassifier. The point is now, if we go back to search the edge, and I'll go back to the home page, and I repeat my search using banks, we'll see the normal facets that we've seen before. I can restrict to the new graph that we created, the FRB webinar, so that we get only tags from this graph. You still have the topic facet and the type facet as before, and you have some new facets, for instance, financial concepts and the Journal of Economics literature classification. So these are coming from the MAECO taxonomy, and these are all tags, all concepts that were associated with documents via the Autoclassifier. So I can further restrict my search and navigate the contents of the document by clicking, for instance, by searching only documents which have this concept as tags. And I can mix and match. For instance, I can go to organization type and say, give me only central banks. So this should help you get an idea of what contents are in your documents, and also guide your search to find any document that you might need. And at this point, I would hand over the presentation back to Jesse.
Great job, Nuno, and thanks for that. What I wanted to do here real quick was just reiterate the process, and there's a little bit of a graphic here that captures the flow. First thing we want to point out is that the content can be retrieved or received over many different types of connectors. In the demonstration today, Nuno was pulling content in real time from Amazon S3 buckets, but the content could be manually uploaded, bulk loaded, received from many different sources, and it could be something, like I said, that we could go out and retrieve, or we could sit and listen and actually have that content sent to us. The next step would be to mention the SMEs, the taxonomists, the librarians, whatever role of different sorts where someone is going to develop or integrate these controlled vocabularies. And today, our scenario was the MAECO, the macroeconomics taxonomy that we mentioned earlier and Nuno had shown. So that was the taxonomy. And then that content comes together and there's a human in the loop feedback between TopBraid AutoClassifier and the corpora and that controlled vocabulary itself. So auto-classification is going to happen. Training and refinement can happen at this step. And then once AutoClassifier is basically told to go ahead and commit those tag sets to production, you have a fully governed tag set management capability to exploit. And TopBraid Edge exploits that internally itself as part of its semantic Lucene index. So we have a full text index capability, faceted index capability that's integrated directly beside and part of our graph index. So that's why we can claim semantic search or intelligent search capabilities. And we wouldn't be doing justice to skip the rules engine, and there was even a question or so during the webinar about this. Could we use rules or other techniques then to further enrich the platform? And absolutely, and Nuno actually showed that whenever he went to the Transforms tab. Just because you've done all of your auto classification doesn't mean that you have to be done. This is where you can write very efficient rules because of your domain representation. And the rules could further interconnect, and you could have any type of if-then scenario, like if this tag and that tag, then you should probably also include this other one. Or it might mean that you want to get classified in a very specific way, or you want to take your generic relationship and make it much more specific and domain specific, like Nuno did in the demonstration. So the rules engine is quite critical here as part of the process, and it just further connects that interconnected web of metadata that TopBraid EDG is hosting. And it's hosting it in scenario 1 for a business user to come to TopBraid EDG as if it was your intelligent search engine. So as part of the webinar invite, we tossed out a few different questions, or 3 different questions, I think it was. And one was, do you need an intelligent search index? Well, this is the scenario right here. TopBraid EDG can be your intelligent search index. It can be your one-stop shop for search and discovery. But the great thing is that the exact same services and responses that the human user would be using against TopBraid EDG, those services and then more are available externally or for external systems via API. So you can come against TopBraid EDG and say, I want your tag set because I already have an intelligent search index, or I already have a search index. I want to make it more intelligent. So you can take all of the enrichment, either due to rules or just auto classification inside of TopBraid EDG, and pull that content out or have it pushed to your index or your architecture. And it could go straight into something like Solr or Elasticsearch or any other type of index that you have that you want to have more capability of. And then the third scenario was a question that was really direct. Do you need real-time auto classification services? So I just want to point out here that this bar here called Edge Interfaces over here that's backing our 7, 8, and 9 steps. Those Edge interfaces allow you to push content against it in real time. So whether it was a tweet, a paragraph, a 500-page document, in real time, on the fly, once Edge is stood up and its auto classifier is up and running, you can bounce your content of any size off of those services and get back your tags directly for you to use exactly however you want, whether it's for presentation on a user interface or ingestion into your architecture and your indices. All 3 scenarios are basically supported by our Edge interfaces. It's our Edge APIs that allow this. And with that, I guess the last point is this is only possible because of our standards-based knowledge graph approach, which is ideal and arguably the only viable foundation for bridging and connecting all of this different metadata and removing the silos that exist in the enterprise, which is really the main goal of data governance in the first place. And with that, Christy, I believe we wrap up and should have plenty of time for questions.
That's right, we do. And we've got several questions to cover, so let's see how many we can get to. If you haven't already, please do submit your questions and discussion points in the question box located in the right-hand side control panel. But we'll go ahead and get started. Jesse, here's one for you. Do I need to load or move all my documents into Edge for AutoClassifier to do its thing?
Great question. No, you do not want to move all of your documents. TopBraid EDG is a metadata platform, so your documents belong exactly where they are. You don't want that kind of work. Edge just needs the metadata and the ability to know where the documents are to retrieve them in real time, or I should say just in time, for auto classification. For training purposes, we do bring in the full content as Nuno showed, but when we're running against the entire corpus, thousands or millions of documents, we don't want anyone to be thinking that they need to move that content to TopBraid EDG. That metadata content, and the full content is read just in time.
Great. Let's take this question. You described how to efficiently get started with building a taxonomy, but how would you recommend getting a training set in place?
I'll take that one. If I understand correctly, the explanation that we gave for taxonomies was when we were talking about the MAECO taxonomy, how I didn't really need to be an expert. I just needed to do good research and bootstrap a taxonomy on the fly by good resources. Well, you can do the same thing with a training tag set if there's existing tags. So if, for example, the source system is SharePoint and there are tags already in SharePoint about those documents, then harvest them. And if you can harvest those and you build those into your controlled vocabulary, you now have a good tag set, or you now have good vocabulary to associate to your documents because it was already in place. So you can use that existing mapping to say that is my tag set and therefore it's my training set. So definitely harvest any existing metadata that you can, treat it like a tagging vocabulary, and then keep the bridge, the connection that was already in place from the source. And you can say, I was given a training set basically, and then you can turn Autoclassifier on.
Okay, great. I'm not sure which one of you want to answer this question, but the question is, in the corpus, is the creator and title metadata extracted automatically from the document, or did you have to enter that data manually?
So I can answer that. No, so that data is extracted automatically when we read the document. So once you specify the connector to the data source, Edge will basically access that data source, look at the documents and parse the documents, extract that metadata that you saw, like title and authors, date, creation dates, along with a lot of other metadata relating to the document itself, like PDF versions and so on. But you don't have to manually add that information.
Great, thank you, Nuno. Here's another question. If a corpus has existing tags, as was said a few minutes ago, what is the corpus format in which the existing tags have to be provided?
I think that question goes along with the last one that I answered, that if tags already existed, you want to take advantage of them as your training set. So this question is about what format. I guess the question is what format do those tags need to be provided in? And I think it's fair right now to say, really any format, any structure, as long as it's something that we can get our hands on, hands in a software sense, to convert into RDF. So we're going to take that original string content of any structure and represent it as things in a controlled vocabulary inside of TopBraid Edge. So it's a strings to things scenario, and then once it's there, we remember the connection, and that's where we can take advantage of it and say, well, this is already trained content. Let's just remember the relationship between the two. But it could be any structure. It could be CSV, XML, any type of serialization, because we're going to convert it into a very strong RDF representation anyways.
Great, thanks, Jesse. What about this? What languages are supported in Autoclassifier?
Silence,
Nuno. I'm totally throwing that one your way because I forget.
I was on mute, sorry. So by default, we have the 4 languages that you saw. So English, French, German, and Spanish, if I recall correctly. But so that's a completely customizable list. So for some specific clients, we've added Portuguese, for instance, and what you need to do is actually have basically a set of rules for the language that allows to break up the text to do into words. But we can customize the list and add new languages if needed.
Okay. I think we'll just take one last question here. Is the Autoclassifier based on MAUI?
Yes, and yeah, I mean, MAUI is under the hood. So MAUI is one of the many open source technologies that we use in our auto classification pipeline, which it's an excellent machine learning technology itself. So yes, MAUI is being used in our pipeline.
Great. I think at this time we'll go ahead and close out the webinar. There are a couple of other questions that we will address via an email sent along with slides and the recorded presentation from today's webinar. Thank you everyone for taking the time to be with us and your interest in the topic, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.